Hello, everybody. This is Dr. Cole. Um, it's Saturday afternoon, August 2nd, and I believe this is week six message for Political Science 1013 on the 7 week schedule for the second 7 weeks of the summer 2025 term. Everybody, it's Saturday. I wanted to go ahead and do this and get it out Saturday so you can see it Saturday evening or Sunday, because our exam number 3, is Monday the 4th, the day after tomorrow, as I'm speaking to you now on Saturday afternoon. So we wanted to talk about Unit 6 on the bureaucracy, and also go over the 4 articles you've been asked to access online, and about 15 items on the exam will come from those. Available 24 hours on Monday the 4th, 50 items, multiple choice and true false. 15 or so coming from the outside readings to be accessed on the internet, the rest on units 5 and 6. Okay. Everybody, before I go further, I haven't heard from too many people that I can recall about term papers. Term paper is, of course, optional. Everybody, on the syllabus, the deadline to contact me about your topic was Thursday the 31st, and it slipped my mind to get a message out at that time. So we will go ahead and extend that through Monday, the day of the exam. So if you wish, take the exam and then contact me about your topic if you would like to go ahead and do a term paper. The term paper is due on Thursday the 14th. The final exam will be Friday the 15th. So we've got under 2 weeks left in the course. After we take the exam Monday, we'll get some material out to you about Units 7 and 8 on the Supreme Court and Congress, and the material to be assigned for the final exam. There will be some more outside readings to be accessed for the final exam, in addition to the class notes for Units 7 and 8. All right, let me then touch very briefly on Unit 6 on the federal bureaucracy. It's a short unit, but of course the bureaucracy has been much in the news lately because of President Trump, Elon Musk, and the DOGE initiative, so-called, which we discussed briefly at the beginning of the class notes. Basically, everybody, in this short set of class notes, we're trying to achieve just a couple things. Number one, simply to lay out the different units of the federal bureaucracy, the 15 cabinet-level departments, and many entities that are not part of a cabinet-level department, such as independent agencies, regulatory commissions, and government corporations. The workforce is still at about 2 million, maybe another million in the military. I think the 2 million or so figure is for the civilian workforce. It's been reduced, the last figure I saw, by about 20,000 by the DOGE initiative, although estimates on that vary. So it hasn't been all that dramatic a reduction in the federal workforce, but it was highly newsworthy in any case, and quite a disruption, which is what Elon Musk and President Trump intended, no doubt. So we want to lay out the different units in the federal bureaucracy, and then once we do that, the remainder of those notes discuss difficulties that the president may have in managing the bureaucracy. And we mention in the class notes, often this is a problem for Republican presidents more than Democrats, because the tendency is to expand the bureaucracy under Democratic administrations. And President Trump and the people around him are absolutely certain that when they came in for the second term, the bureaucracy was full of people who were hostile to their views, which is why they wanted to sort of strike back at the federal bureaucracy. Okay, so it's quite topical what we're talking about there in the class notes for Unit 6, although it's a fairly brief set of class notes. Now, everybody, the readings, you have 3 about Trump and 1 about one of his cabinet secretaries. Well, of those 3 about Trump, one of them is about somebody on his staff, and then there's yet another one about one of the cabinet secretaries. We have an interview by Jess Bidgood with the New York Times White House correspondent Maggie Haberman. Now, President Trump is not especially happy with the New York Times, but he spent more time with Maggie Haberman than just about any other journalist. So, more than just about anybody in the press corps, Maggie Haberman knows something about what's going on inside Trump's head. So, I think that would be very interesting and topical to look at. Okay, how the Trump era changed Trump. Okay, from really just a few weeks ago, as most of this material is, just about all of it. Then we have a piece about the attack on Iran, the nuclear facilities in Iran. This is an article, once again, by Just Bitgood. It appeared a few days before the attack actually took place, trying to anticipate how the president's supporters out there in the MAGA base and his supporters in Congress would react to a bombing raid to try to take out, insofar as possible, the nuclear program in Iran. Okay. All right. Then we have yet another article, this time from the Wall Street Journal, about the president's deputy chief of staff, Stephen Miller. Now, we had been reading before about Susie Wiles, the chief of staff. This is deputy chief of staff Stephen Miller, who's a quite powerful, influential individual in the administration, especially on the immigration issue, and someone students may have heard of. Okay. So that article is from the Wall Street Journal about Stephen Miller, the deputy chief of staff in the White House, just below Susie Wiles on the organizational chart. Then finally, from Politico, you have an article about Brooke Rollins, who is a cabinet secretary in the Trump administration. And the article discusses difficulties she's having, sort of caught in the middle between Trump and the people that her department serves. So you want to take a look at that from Politico about Brooke Rollins, cabinet secretary in the Trump administration. All right, those are the 4 things to look at online. All right, about 15 of the test items will come from those articles. The remaining 35 or so based on units 5 and 6 on the presidency and the federal bureaucracy. Okay. Once again, everybody, when you get this message, if you have not done so, please be sure you've tried those links and perhaps printed those articles out. And if you have trouble accessing them over the course of the day tomorrow, if you get with me, I'll try to get that material out to you. But we really should be trying these links as soon as we get these messages for each exam. All right then. Everybody, what I want to do next for just a few minutes, we're taking the exam Monday in just a day or two. It means the rest of the week we need to be getting started on working on the material for the final exam, Units 7 and 8 on the Supreme Court and on Congress. Now, we're probably only going to have one more video message out for after today. So I want to get started on Unit 7 on the Supreme Court for just a couple of minutes. And then we'll finish that up and talk about Unit 8 on Congress next time before we wind this up. So, once you take the exam, you'll want to begin looking at the Unit 7 material. It starts out talking very briefly about the federal court system in general. We're mostly interested in the Supreme Court because of the political significance of the major so-called landmark decisions it may make. Below the level of the Supreme Court, there are the circuit courts of appeal and the U.S. district courts. So cases may make their way up from the district courts to the courts of appeal to the Supreme Court, or they may come from state Supreme Courts. Now, we talk a bit about how the Supreme Court does its business. Legal briefs will be submitted from all kinds of parties. The justices will go through those with the help of their clerks. Once that's done, the cases will be discussed in conference, which will give everybody an idea of where the justices stand. Opinions may be written and rewritten and recirculated until you get an opinion that attracts the support of at least 5. Most of the time, you will have a majority opinion that gets the support of at least 5 of the justices. Be familiar with such terms as majority, concurring, and dissenting opinions. Okay. Now, beyond that, everybody, You will find terminology in the class notes such as judicial review and judicial activism and restraint. You'll see those terms defined and discussed. You'll also see a discussion of the case of Marbury versus Madison in the early 1800s, the first time the Supreme Court declared something unconstitutional, which is what we mean by the power of judicial review, the power to say what the Constitution means. We talk about different ways that the court can be checked and balanced, all of which are very difficult. No justice has ever been impeached and removed. There have been a few constitutional amendments that appear to have been directed at particular Supreme Court opinions. Maybe the easiest way to check the Supreme Court is to appoint new justices with views different than the ones they will be replacing. That's what President Trump tried to do, and many of the people who voted for Trump might have had that in mind. He's appointed 3 justices to the Supreme Court going back to his first term. So that's one way of checking and balancing the Supreme Court, which is going to bring us to a discussion of the Supreme Court as a political institution. And we discussed the question of whether the Supreme Court ought to be viewed as a legal or a political institution. It turns out it's really very difficult to keep the politics out of the Supreme Court. Okay. Whenever a vacancy occurs, the justice who is departing, who's quitting, who's passed away, is spoken of in terms of whether that justice was a liberal or a conservative, and so will the potential replacements. Okay. They are all discussed in terms of their political views and where they fall on the political spectrum, although they would tell you that that doesn't necessarily always come into play in a Supreme Court decision. Right now, they are divided between 6 who were appointed by Republican presidents and 3 who were appointed by Democrats. So we might think that then there are 6 conservatives and 3 liberals. But the justices would hasten to tell you they don't always divide that way, because they have other responsibilities than that, you might say. Loyalty to fealty to the Constitution is supposed to come before your political views. But very often, in a sensitive case, you will see division along political lines, and that explains why each of those seats on the Supreme Court has become such a big prize. And in our section called The Court as a Political Institution, we talk about several highly controversial, acrimonious battles revolving around getting justices confirmed to the Supreme Court. That happened to one extent or another with all of President Trump's appointees. And we could go all the way back to the Reagan administration with the attempt to get Robert Bork on the court, which was unsuccessful. And then during Bush 41, he was successful in getting Clarence Thomas on the court in spite of another huge controversy that arose over that nomination. Now, we will leave it there for now. Next time, what I will do is talk about several of the landmark important Supreme Court decisions that are talked about at the end of the notes to Unit 7. And then we want to move on to Unit 8 on the United States Congress before we wind this up for the summer 2025 term. Okay, everybody, the exam will be Monday over 24 hours, 45 minutes once you start it. Then Tuesday, we will get some material out for our last discussion and for the final exam. Once again, we missed a deadline on the term paper topics, so if you want to contact me about that over the weekend or Monday, that will be fine. The papers are due Thursday the 14th. The final exam is Friday the 15th. Our third exam is this Monday the 4th. So take it easy, study hard, and we'll be talking to you at least one more time about a week from now.